case there will be no class next Saturday, so in case anybody wants to retake it. So finding a comfortable seat. You can put a little blanket underneath your sit bones if you need to. And then just close your eyes for a moment and just check in. Check in with where you connect to the floor, your base. How it feels to breathe. You don't need to change that, but just notice how things are going right now. How much energy you have this morning. And then we'll set up the seat in the manner that I've been learning from Angela Farmer. So we'll take the left thigh and just gently draw it out of the hip. Just kind of imagine that you could lengthen that whole bone, that femur. And then observe the breath in your nose. And then we'll take the right thigh, do the same. You can give it like a little external rotation, and then just imagine you can kind of drag the bone any amount out of the hip. And observe the breath in your nose. And then we'll reach down and find the left sit bone. Let yourself get acquainted with its shape. And then see if you can curl your fingers right around the inner edge. And you're going to drag the sit bone back and diagonal out to the left. And at the same time, could you imagine sliding your pelvic floor to the right? That space in between the sit bones shifts a bit to the right. And then you can place that left sit bone down and observe the breath in your nose. If your left nostril has opened up, just with the attention to the sit bone, it might have opened up a bit. Imagine that you could send a little wormhole down from the back of your left nostril, all the way down the left side of the spine, and then right into that inner left sit bone. Almost like you had a little straw, a little tube from the nostril all the way down to the floor. And then extend that down as if you could grow a root from the inner sit bone. Past the mat, past the floor, into the earth. And then grow that root in the same direction that we dragged the sit bones, so down and then kind of diagonal to the left. And then we'll reach down and find the right one. So you can curl the fingers right around the inside edge. And you're going to drag that sit bone, and it might not go very far, but just imagine you could drag it back into the right as you shift your pelvic floor to the left. As if you could pry open a little bit of space between your hip bone, your pelvic bone. In the center of the pelvic floor. And then you can place that down. Observe the breath. And if your right nostril has opened up, and even if it hasn't, imagine you had like a wormhole coming down from the right nostril, lining the right side of the spine, and then finding the inner right sit bone. And from there, you're going to grow a root down from that inner right sit bone. Imagine that all the way down into the earth. And then diagonal to the right, behind you. And then feel into the left and right roots at once. And notice how it feels to breathe. And from this grounded place, if there's an intention or a dedication that you'd like to set for practice, bring that to mind. And then we'll fold forward. So just walking the hands forward. Just come to the first place that you feel like there's some resistance or maybe a little bit of sensation, and just sit with that. And as we kind of walk our torsos forward, I want you to imagine you could grow roots off the back of your sit bones. That those roots could dive down into the earth and root slightly forward. And from those nice stable roots, can you grow the whole back side of the body bigger? So the backs of the waist grow wide. Back ribs flare out. Even the back of the skull broadens right at the base. And then out from under that kind of big shadow of the back side of the body, can you let the front side of the body slither forward a bit? And anytime you lose the grounding through your sit bones, you can reimagine those roots. Maybe you crawl a little bit further forward. And we'll roll up to a seat. Grab a blanket. If you have a bolster, you can use a bolster. I'm just gonna fold the blanket like we're gonna do a back bolster. It's just that thinner fold, and then just roll it up. It doesn't have to be very firm. And we're gonna bring the left ribs right up onto the top of the blanket. And we'll take the right arm up alongside the ear. You can hold on to the right wrist with your left hand and just give it a little pull. Your head can be on the floor, it can be on a pillow, it can rest on your left arm. And as you breathe, can you make space inside the rib cage? Feel your left ribs press into the blanket, right ribs expand up towards the ceiling. Both sides moving equally out from the center. So you have that added pressure of the blanket to work with on the left side. Feel the weight of your hips. And then slide yourself a little higher up so the blanket is in the left waist. And if it feels like it's too big, just unroll it a bit. So you have those left floating ribs. Just be mindful of those. You're going to draw both of your knees up so they're parallel with the blanket. And then the right foot is going to step on the floor just above the left thigh. You can hold onto that ankle with the opposite hand. And then the right arm will reach up towards the ceiling. And then just close your eyes. You might not have to feel around much to notice what's calling your attention. So you might have some pretty obvious sensation that you can pay attention to. And you might start a little dialogue with that space, that sensation. I usually start out just with like, thank you. I know you're feeling pretty tight. You must have been holding on pretty hard. Sometimes you don't need words. You can just keep your attention on that spot and things will start to shift. As this shape becomes more comfortable, just with time, you might open up the arm out to the side. You might take that arm diagonally up and out from the shoulder. Your top leg might press open from the knee, from the thigh. So at first, in this shape, you might be somewhat passive as you give your body some attention and remind yourself that you're safe. And then as things feel more comfortable, let there be more action. So intentionally press the knee open, stretch through the arm. Kind of actively moving into a deeper stretch at the end it feels like it lets my body know, like, no, this is on purpose. We're trying to do this on purpose. And so then things kind of move a little easier rather than feeling like the body's just being pulled around. And then you can come up to a seat. Press on up. You can take the blanket out for a moment. Notice the breath. Notice the ease of movement in the rib cage. Maybe one side is different than the other. And then we'll do the other side. So that roll will go under the right ribs. And you'll take the left arm up alongside the ear. Imagine your breath moving laterally inside the rib cage. So your rib cage connects into the least mobile part of your spine, which makes sense, right? We're trying to protect everything inside the rib cage, your lungs, your heart. But without attention, because it is the least mobile place, the neck and the lower back can end up becoming hypermobile. And then we lose any option from the thoracic part of the spine, the rib cage spine. So just the act of breathing and breathing out wide, because of the way that the rib cage connects in at the back of the spine, or the back of the ribs kind of connect into the spine, you kind of pry the joints open with every breath. So you can picture that, every breath that you're taking here over this blanket, it's just opening up, creating some space in the most congested part of your spine. And then you're going to roll yourself a little higher on the blanket so it's in your waist. Unroll it a bit as needed. Knees up. And then we'll take the left foot and step on the floor above the right thigh. Hold that foot. And left arm up. You might just stay here, giving some attention where it's needed. And as things kind of open and relax, maybe you open the arm up, maybe you press the knee away. My whole left side is pretty tight, and so when I practice this on my own, I could stay there for 20 minutes, just slowly feeling all the different sections of the left side start to open up, or really just start to relax. And I've really been thinking of sensation in the yoga practice this year as like just a little conversation in terms of what feels safe. So when you feel a strong sensation in the body, it's usually body like, is this safe? Is this okay to go here? Or I don't want to go here, right? Sometimes it's that strong. And so backing out a little bit when it feels like it's, whoa, too strong. And then seeing if, just with some attention and time, you can have that inner dialogue where you're like, okay, this is actually, you don't have to work so hard here. Or this is safe. You don't have to hold on so tight. You don't have to protect me so much. When that side feels done, you can come off the blanket and come back up to a seat. Notice the breath. Reset your roots if needed. All right, and then we're going to come up into tabletop. And just take some cat-cows. See if you can feel that both the cat and the cow can start from the movement of the pelvis. And then maybe there's some side to side movement. Maybe you find some big circles. And then we'll come back to child's pose, walking the hands forward. Feel the roots of the sit bones drop down. Probably not touching the floor, so you might have to imagine them jumping into the floor like roots of a mangrove tree or above the ground. And maybe the fingers crawl a little bit further forward, inviting the lower back to open up and broaden. Walk the hands a little to the right. And then back through center and a little to the left. And then back through center. We're going to take the knees out as wide as the mat, maybe wider, into a nice wide-kneed child's pose. Still feeling like you have roots coming off the sit bones. Imagine the roots from the inner sit bones reaching back and diagonal away. See if that allows you to soften your belly a bit. If this becomes a place that feels really comfortable, you can bring the hips forward so they're in line with the knees. Maybe the feet come out wide in line with the knees. The toes turn out to the side, so the inner edges of the feet will be on the floor, coming into a frog pose. And this is a pose that for most of us, we will get some pretty obvious sensation. There's a lot of holding that goes on through the inner thighs. There's a lot of fear there can be in that area. And rather than letting the lower belly kind of hang towards the floor and sag into a back bend, think about your lower belly kind of lifting up towards the sacrum. Yeah, tailbone rooting down. These look great, you guys. Sure they. Still interesting. What kind of a conversation can you have with the inner thighs, with the groins, with the pelvic floor? And you might even play around with pressing the inner knees into the floor as if you could scoop up the floor in between the knees and engage the inner thighs for a breath or two, and then let that go and see if you're able to shift anything. You might also imagine, we're talking about kind of actively going into a stretch as a way to remind your body that you're safe. Could you imagine actually lifting the knees off the floor? That's not going to happen. I'd be very shocked if I saw any of that actually happen, but just imagine that you could pick your knees up. And then we'll come out of this. You can just kind of slither onto your belly. You can walk the knees together. And maybe with the knees together, circle out the hips. And then we're going to tuck the toes under. You can have the hands on the floor. Actually reach back and spread your toes. You can even like pull them out a little bit. And you can stay right here with the hands on the ground. You can sit up on the hips. We're going for a stretch across the bottoms of the feet. If all you feel is really strong sensation at like the base of the big toe, you can try bringing your big toes closer together and then angling your heels out a bit. That might help you get into the other toes and take the pressure off that big toe joint. And you could stay there sitting on your heels, or you can lift the knees up, lift the heels up, letting the heels come up close to the sit bones. And that'll usually help you get in. You can always use blocks under your hands if you can't reach the floor for this. That'll help you get into those other toes. So heels are up towards the sit bones, knees are up towards the chest. And then let the heels drop down. And we'll come into a standing forward fold, taking the feet hip width apart. Spread the toes. Release the base of the skull. And even if your knees are quite bent here, you can think about actively trying to lift the hips up towards the ceiling. And imagine the roots from the inner sit bones trying to root up into the ceiling. Bring your hands up to the base of the skull. And I want you to imagine just with your fingertips that you could peel the base of the skull out wider. So if you could pry it apart right at the base. And then hold opposite elbows. And imagine you could drop roots down off the backs of the heels. Off the inner heels. Off the outer heels and the fronts of the heels. Imagine spreading roots out from the webbing of the toes, especially in between the big toe and the second toe. And then from those nice stable feet, we'll roll up to standing. Arms rest by your sides. Shake them out a little bit. Feel the roots of the heels, roots of the toes. And then we'll take the arms up. You're going to hold onto the right wrist with your left hand, and we'll pull it up and over. So much so that that heel lifts right up off the floor. And then feel into that little imaginary wormhole that you have from your right nostril down into your right sit bone. And I want you to imagine you could slide up the front of that wormhole. So from the inner right sit bone all the way up the front side of the spine, nice and long. And then go down the back. So from that right nostril all the way down the back of that wormhole, the back of that right sit bone, and let that help reground the right heel. Come up to stand and just see how it feels. And we'll do the other side. So you're going to hold the left wrist, lift it up and over so that that left heel becomes ungrounded. And then you're going to travel up that left wormhole from your inner left sit bone all the way up into the nostril, dragging the whole left side of the spine longer. And then slide back down the back, letting that left heel re-root. Back up to center. All right, and then we'll do a little bit of breath work here. You can bring your hands right up to the side ribs. You can hold here like this with your thumbs kind of curled around the back, or you can make little fists, whatever feels more comfortable for you. So we're going to fill up, feeling the rib cage expand out into the sides, into the hands. So fill all the way up with your inhale. You're going to hold at the top, and as you hold your breath with your fists, you're going to tap off the rib cage. Make sure you get to the back, especially those back bottom ribs that we can forget about. And then as you exhale, you're going to tap with your hands. And then as you hold the exhale, fingertips. And then shake it out, shake it all out. We're going to do that 2 more times. So if you feel like you're going to panic because you're holding your breath longer than you want to, just go at your own pace. So breathe in. Hold. Fists. Exhale. Palms. And exhale, retention. You're going to hold that exhale, pads of your fingers, fingertips. And then shake it out. And then we'll do one more. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. And then fingertips. And then shake it out. Do some waves with your spine. So same thing that we did when we were in tabletop, where you're feeling like it's the movement of the pelvis that starts the cat and the cow. And then feel your nice grounded feet. Let's inhale, take the arms up. And then exhale, fold down. In your forward fold, reach up for your right sit bone. Think about pulling it up and back, waking up, opening up that little window at the top of the back thigh. And as if you could like peek out that window, slide the top of the back thigh back and up. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side.
So lifting, stretch up the back of the legs from that area right below your sit bone, right at the top back of the thighs. And then we'll inhale and lengthen the spine. Exhale, plank. Take a breath in your plank. Exhale, lower down onto your belly. Come onto your forearms for Sphinx pose. So elbows under your shoulders. Rooting down through the fingertips. All the knuckles. And just for a moment, close your eyes. Imagine the roots diving off the back of your sit bones into the floor. And from there, grow the backside of the body nice and long, nice and wide, as if the backside of the body is looming up over you like a shadow. And then the front side of the body wants to lift up and fill into that space. Maybe take the elbows up, take a breath in. And then exhale, lower down. Press up through tabletop, and we'll come into downward facing dog. Fingers spread wide. Roots through the heels of the feet and the hands. The webbing between the fingers and the toes. And then those little windows at the top back of your thighs lift up. And you feel for sliding just a little longer through the little wormholes, nostrils to sit bones. Draw the right knee into the chest. Step the foot in between the hands. And we'll release the back knee down. Inhale the left arm up to a little side bend. And if you could grow a root off your outer left sit bone, could you imagine that root diving down and then underneath you to the right? And does that give any more stability for this side bend? And then we'll bring the left hand down. We'll take the right arm up. The right arm back. Feel that right arm opening up the space across the chest. Feel the upper back spreading wide. And then if it's within range, you can bend the knee and hold the foot. Maybe that foot comes in a little closer to your seat. Maybe you come down onto your left forearm. And see if there's a conversation that you can have with your left hip, your left thigh. And then release that back foot. Hands on the ground or blocks. We're gonna lift the back knee and step to the front of the mat. Lengthen out your spine as you inhale. Fold down, exhale. Stand up, inhale. And bring your hands to your heart, exhale. Feel your roots. Observe the breath in your nose. And if one side is more open, you can imagine connecting it down, not just into the sit bone, but extending that little wormhole all the way down to the inner heel. Inhale, take the arms up. Exhale, fold. Long spine, inhale. Exhale, plank. Take a breath in. Lower down as you exhale. Sphinx or cobra pose as you inhale. And we'll hold in either pose. Imagine the backside of the body could grow broad, so you could spread wide out the backs of the waist, the back bottom ribs. Back of the heart opens up. And then the front body just wants to lift up and fill into that space. It's like, oh, you made me a safe little cave here. I'm gonna stretch nice and big into that. And then fold down. Come back into downward facing dog. Step the left foot forward. Right knee comes down. And we're going to side bend over to the left. Imagine that you could slide roots down that outer right sit bone. Dive down deep into the earth and then underneath you to the left. I find the more I can picture that and really kind of feel into that outer root, the easier the side bend is, the more stable it feels. And we'll bring the right hand down, open up to the left. Open up the left arm, side bending to the right. And you can continue to open up that left arm, so it's going to reach straight back behind you, palm facing open to the left. Think about reaching back, broadening the upper back to open up the chest. And then if it's there, bend the knee and hold the foot. Don't worry about if you don't have this. It's no big deal. Even if you normally can grab the foot, but today it's not happening, who cares? Just leave it back there. So you could just be in the lunge. Where you have the foot, maybe you come down onto the forearm. Whether you have the foot or not, you're probably feeling something in the front of that right thigh and hip. And so you just listen. It's like, okay, what do you want to tell me? How does it feel to breathe into this space? And you're always on the watch for you're able to release some tension out of the hip, but then it creeps up into your jaw, into your armpits. Notice how we just don't know how to let go sometimes. And so maybe just a couple reminders into some other areas that might be getting a little jumpy.
My thighs always need a longer talking to than most other places. They need more time with someone just listening. And then release the foot, bring the hands down, we'll step into a forward fold. Stand up. Hands to the heart. And you observe the breath. And if that's opened up your right nostril, imagine connecting that down to that right sit bone, down to the inner right heel. Inhale, take your arms up. Exhale, fold. Long spine, inhale. Exhale, plank. Just hold here. Feeling your lower belly pull up towards your sacrum. Tailbone dive slightly towards the floor. Imagine you could take the back of your sit bones and kind of tuck them into the top of your thighs a bit. So you're not shooting your butt up into the air. And then we'll lower down. Back bend as you inhale, cobra, low cobra, sphinx pose maybe. And then we'll take a child's pose. And then come up to a seat. We'll set up for Upavishta Konasana, wide-legged forward fold. So take your legs out wide. And we'll set this up just like we did that first seat. So you can think about dragging the thighs out of the hip a bit. Dragging your sit bones diagonally back. And this might be a great place to pause. If there's a lot talking to you, then you'll just listen. It feels like you could start to come forward. Imagine those roots diving off the backs of your sit bones as you go. And you're not just hinging from those roots, you're kind of climbing up out of them. So the further down those roots go off the back of your sit bones, the further up your spine you're able to crawl. As if the bottom of your sacrum is trying to slither up into your rib cage spine. So the bottom front of the sacrum trying to slither up. After class last week, I was Googling to see if I could find a picture of your anterior longitudinal ligament, this ligament that we were talking about last week, the one that's like iridescent, shiny like the inside of the shell that you have lining the front of your spine. It's gorgeous. I couldn't find any dissection pictures that I didn't think would also make you a little queasy. So feel free to Google if you want to check it out. It's absolutely stunning. So from the roots at the backs of the sit bones, the whole back body is able to grow broad and tall. And then the front side of your body can slither out of that a bit. And through that process, your hips might start talking. And so you really listen. If you need more time here, feel free. So you can come back up to a seat. You can hold under the knees and bring your legs together. Just hug your legs, maybe let your chin drop. Come up to kneeling. If it's uncomfortable to sit on your heels, sit on a block. You can also tuck the toes. You can also have blocks. We're gonna work into camel. So you can also have blocks just on either side of the feet. To bring the floor a little closer if you can't reach your feet easily. So I like to come into camel and build it from here. So holding onto the heels or hands on your blocks. Sitting on a block if you need to. And then the first step is we'll just open up the rib cage spine. So imagine you could spread the back of the heart open wide, and then you can use the back of the heart to lift the front. So the whole rib cage spine opens up first. And then you can push down into the knees, push down into the feet with your hands, and maybe lift the hips up. Chin can stay tucked into the chest, or you can drop it back. Again, if the blocks are too much, but you can't quite reach the heels, you can have the toes tucked under here. The sacrum is going to lift up to help lift the front side of the lower spine. And then from the front of the sacrum all the way up the front side of the spine, slide a little longer. Feel like you can connect into the little wormholes from your nostrils, down the sides of the spine, the inner sit bones, really down into the inner knees here, and lengthen those longer. And then the hips can come back to the heels. And take a moment. We'll do a couple more because it usually just gets better. So if you didn't like this approach, building from the bottom up, you can always start up here, hold the hips. But we'll start with the same approach, whether you're standing on your knees or you're sitting on your heels. We'll open it up from the rib cage spine first, the thoracic spine. So hands on the heels or hands on the hips. And we'll lift and open up. So the back of the heart is almost trying to present the heart up towards the ceiling. Lift the hips if they're not already lifted. If they are already lifted and you have the heart open, And you could see about stepping the hands down. What does it feel like to breathe? If the lower back is complaining, it's usually mad that it's doing too much of the pose. So really get into that rib cage part of your spine. Think about lifting your rib cage spine up away from your lower back. And then we'll come back down. Nice, you guys. We're going to do one more. Decide where you want to start. So if you had your hands on blocks, look like this. Lifting up, up, up out of that rib cage spine. Think about lifting really the whole rib cage up away from the hips. And then maybe you'd root through the knees and the hips lift. If this is all feeling comfortable, you can walk your hands in a little closer towards the back of the knees. Longer through your wormholes, feeling down through the roots. Whatever helps you breathe easier. And then come on out. Just sit off to one side. And we'll come back into constructive rest. Hug the knees in. Squeeze them in towards your chest. Let the lower back round a bit. And then bring them in towards the armpits. And press the sacrum down. Press the back of the hips down. And then feet on the floor. And release the hands behind the neck. So the pinky side of the hands is right up in the base of the skull. And encourage your neck to lengthen. Using your hands to do this, you're going to turn your head a little to the left. And then bring your head a little closer to your right shoulder. And then back to center. You're going to turn your head a little to the right, using your hands. And then bring your head a little closer to your left shoulder. Bring the head back through center. You can release the hands, but then bring your fingertips right into the base of the skull. So kind of dig in there a little bit. Feel the big muscles that hold your head onto your neck. And there's like a little divot between the base of the skull and between those big wiry muscles that you can feel there. And you're just going to imagine digging your fingertips into that little divot that you can start to spread it wide. And what if the broadening that you were doing manually with your hands at the base of the skull was also happening across the back of the hips, across the pelvis. So the sacrum and the base of the skull get wider. And then release the arms down by your sides. Extend the legs long. Cover up as you need. And as you close your eyes in Shavasana, you feel into the back side of the body, everything that's touching down. Could you imagine the whole back side of the body broadening like the base of your skull? Just pooling out in all directions. And then the front side of the body can spread and soften back into that space. Observe the breath in your nose. And you're going to roll over towards the more open side. Drawing the knees up, let your head rest on your bottom arm. And if you keep watching, eventually the other side will open up. And then you'll press up to a seat. Feel the roots of your sit bones, especially those inner roots, diving down and diagonally back. Imagine you could connect the breath at the back of your nose all the way down into those roots. Remember your intention or your dedication. Bring your hands to your heart. And we'll close out by chanting one Om. Nice work, you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.